Hello, everyone, and welcome to Rich Sports Talk. The Jets season is in peril, and it was a rough Sunday night viewing for this New York Jets team. I'm coming to you live on Monday. Your reactions to this and the big picture going forward. Unfortunately, I could not go live last night, but I wanted to give you my thoughts and my ideas about this team and why there is a bigger issue and a big problem for this Jet fan base. This New York Jets season, if we're honest with ourselves, it dramatically changed 4 plays into Aaron Rodgers' career. The Jets went all in on Aaron Rodgers. It was clear that this was all about Aaron Rodgers. But why did the Jets have to go to Aaron Rodgers and give Aaron Rodgers everything he wanted? It's because of how bad Zach Wilson was. They had to acquiesce to Aaron. Yes, we'll get you your offensive coordinator. Nice guy, but does Nathaniel Hackett outside of Aaron Rodgers have a great track record? Not really sure, but Aaron Rodgers wants him, so we'll get him. Alan Lazard, Aaron Rodgers wants him, so we'll go get him. Dalvin Cook, do we really need him? Aaron wants him, so he gets brought in. You look right now that this Jet team is in this position because of Zach Wilson. And I'm getting sick and tired of defending Zach Wilson and trying to defend it to the few people in the crowd saying it's not all Zach Wilson's fault. It's not all on Zach. The offensive line is bad. The play calling is bad. This coaching staff is bad. And yes, you can take all those into account. Yes, you can point out all those flaws. But the NFL is about opportunity. And Zach Wilson last night had those opportunities. Yes, I know the penalties were devastated. And let's put it this way, C.J. Uzomah should not be on the field over Jeremy Ruckert at this point. Jeremy Ruckert should be playing over C.J. Uzomah, and Uzomah should have been forced to find his own flight home from Vegas last night after that performance. But Zach Wilson had multiple opportunities, including the opportunity of his NFL career. The New York Jets force a turnover. This defense gives them life. He has to go down the field plenty of time against a bad defense and put the ball in the end zone. But instead, we get the same old Zach Wilson, the crippling mistake. And now people are saying, oh, come on, it's not all bad with Zach. It's not that bad. The New York Jets, what has been the constant the past 3 years? They've changed the offensive play calling. They've changed the personnel. They've changed everything. The one constant has been Zach Wilson as the quarterback. I want to remind people of these mind-boggling statistics. The Jets have now gone 36 consecutive drives without a touchdown. 36 drives. They have 2 TDs in their last 55 possessions. And here's a little fun nugget for everyone that's saying, oh, it's not all that bad with Zach. Okay. Zach Wilson has thrown a touchdown on just 20 of his career 931 passes. How does that rank? Well, this 2.1% touchdown rate is the lowest in NFL history among players who have thrown over 900 passes in the league. And just for good measure, let's look around the league, shall we? I did this last weekend, but let's do it again. How did Aiden O'Connell do? Aiden O'Connell, against a superior defense, when he had to, made the play in the game. He made a touchdown throw. Zach Wilson had opportunities, but didn't make the play in the game. The other thing, too, is Zach Wilson now has not thrown a touchdown pass in the last 2 weeks. Tommy DeVito, who was an undrafted quarterback who still lives at home with his parents, has thrown 3 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks for the inept New York Giants. And last I checked, the New York Giants don't have the supposed weaponry that this Jets offense has? How is it that any other quarterback not named Zach Wilson has this offense gotten better with? But this isn't just pile on Zach Day. I know that's the easy thing to do. I know that's the obvious thing to do. But to me, there is a more alarming trend with this team and a bigger question from this game. Before this game went off, Ian Rappaport had an interesting report that Carson Wentz reached out to the New York Jets before he signed with the Rams. Basically, his people reached out and said to the Jets, are you looking for a quarterback? Are you looking potentially for someone? The Jets said, despite every statistic I just threw at you about how poor Zach Wilson is as an NFL quarterback, no, we're good. We don't need you. And I've heard this counter argument all week. Well, Zach's the best option because the backups are Tim Boyle and Trevor Siemian, and it shows that the New York Jets and this coaching staff don't believe in those two quarterbacks. Excuse me? So if that's the case, and the organization is telling you they do not believe in those two quarterbacks, shouldn't that send off an alarm bell and tell you that maybe this team should be looking at other possibilities and at other options for a quarterback? Because I am just looking around this league, and I am seeing teams that, may I remind you, don't have the longest playoff drought in the NFL attempting to get better. Look at what Dobbs is doing for the Minnesota Vikings. He was traded for a 6th-round pick, and the Vikings didn't give up on this season. The Rams went out and signed Carson Wentz. And personally, I would not sign Carson Wentz, but I'm looking around this league and going to myself, the Jets couldn't trade a third-day draft pick. I know. This is the big picture. 2024, when Aaron is back, you want to save as many draft picks as possible. A day 3 pick, you couldn't even bring in someone to compete with Zach Wilson. And they keep telling us over and over and over again, like we do not understand that Zach is getting better. Zach is showing progress. We know what we're doing. But we look at the film and we look at the games, and it's clear you don't trust Zach Wilson. You don't let him throw the ball down the field. You don't trust him to throw the ball down the field. You have to keep everything stupidly simplistic for him to be successful. I want to remind the New York Jets and their fans that the New York Jets yesterday lost to a rookie quarterback and an interim head coach in his second game as a head coach. And the Jets' offense looked ill-prepared, couldn't move the football, and once again had over 8 penalties that were killer. This is a bad reflection on this coaching staff because it's one thing to defend your players, but it's another thing when not only is your offense historically anemic, but on top of all that, they are undisciplined. You cannot watch this offense. I'm pretty sure that making fans watch this offense is basically submitting them to psychological torture because the Jets' offense is so frustrating. And I get it. It's not for Zach. It's Aaron's offense. I get all of that. But you can't try something else. This team, I have to wonder, and I brought this up on my Twitter account last night, and this is a very alarming thing. Did this Jet organization make a decision that basically when Aaron Rodgers got hurt, that they wrote off this season? That basically they looked at it and said, this season isn't going anywhere. Let's just get through it the best we can, and we'll regroup for 2024. Like, did they make that conscious decision as an organization? Because their actions are telling me that's what they decided. Because if Robert Saleh or Joe Douglas weren't told by Woody Johnson, you are good for 2024 because of this injury, I'm kind of certain that this team would be a little bit more aggressive in trying to improve this roster, that they would have been more aggressive at the deadline if there was heat on them that there was any possibility that they could be losing their jobs next year. And their actions are telling me, and they keep waving in front of the fan base, well, Aaron Rodgers is going to make this miraculous recovery. Aaron Rodgers is going to be back. Aaron Rodgers is going to be back in December. Well, guess what? If the Jets lose the next 2 games and are 4-7, it doesn't matter if Aaron Rodgers is back in December. It doesn't matter if he's healthy because they couldn't win the games when they needed to. And I kept going back to this and saying, well, why weren't they more aggressive at the trade deadline? Is it because they're trying to keep their picks for next year? Again, I understand trying to build this team for next year, but when you have this great of a defense, when you have this team that you can see just with competent quarterback play could still be very good, when you see that this fan base that has been tortured forever, and especially the last 12 years, that are desperate for the playoffs, that haven't been to the playoffs in 12 seasons, now going likely on 13, that this organization is basically not all in. This fan base is desperate for the playoffs. Are the New York Jets? Because I always say this, I don't really read into the press conferences. It's coach speak. They're going to try to tell us what they want to hear. It's a game. They don't want to upset players. They have a certain way of speaking. I don't always take that into account. My biggest thing, and I say this all the time on this channel, is your actions speak louder than words. And the 2 biggest actions that I've seen from this Jet team is the following. Number 1, this team was not aggressive at the trade deadline. And I believe part of it is they don't want to give up assets that they can use to put around Aaron in 2024. The other action, too, is you keep telling us that you think Zach is getting better, that Zach is developing as a quarterback. Yet offensively, you do every single thing in your power to protect him. The most innovative and creative play yesterday was when you had Garrett Wilson throwing the football. The biggest thing is you are trying to get Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall the ball in space and hoping that they rip off a 40 or 50-yard play. Not that Zach makes a great throw, not that Zach beats the defense, not that Zach reads the coverage correctly, that somehow by God's green earth that either of them can somehow make a whole defense miss and score a touchdown. And it is not sustainable. Yes, this offense has flaws. They don't have enough playmakers. And you look back at that draft now, and I like Will McDonald a lot, but you cannot look back at that draft and go, well, they passed on all those receivers. They could have taken the first receiver in the draft, and some of them looked pretty darn good. From one Jets drive, they really liked Michael Mayer and had a great catch last night. Could have used a great tight end. You just look at this team that with that first round pick, again, on a defensive line that has a lot of great defensive pieces. Did they really need another pass rusher? When this offense, outside of Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall, doesn't have a playmaker, and arguably one of the more exciting playmakers that they could have is Izzy, and Izzy is inactive for every. I'm serious. Like, did Izzy do something? Did Izzy say something in a meeting? Because I know Dalvin Cook showed some juice last night, but you're talking about getting more speed on the field and guys that can hit home runs. Izzy last year had the FBS, like the best conversion rate, the most touchdowns per touch last year in college football. You have that guy on your roster. You can't figure out to put him in a jet sweep. You can't use him as a slot receiver. You can't use him on a screen pass. You have this potential weapon who we saw explosiveness in the preseason, who we saw the ability to take it the distance, who we saw could make people miss, and yet he can't dress on the freaking roster every week. Like, you have this guy who you drafted. Like, I'm sorry, but outside of Joe Tippmann, what guy is making a big impact? Even Will McDonald, who I like and I think can be a great pass rusher, was out last night. Carl Lawson was in there. Was Carl Lawson great? No, but did you notice that McDonald wasn't in there? No, because they have a great defense, and this is the other frustrating thing. This defense has been elite for 2 years, and I do think it proves that Robert Saleh can be a great head coach, because if he's a head coach, do you know your side of the ball? And is your side of the ball great? And look, Robert Sala's defense has been great the last 2 years. It's living up to the billing. The problem is the offense, they cannot figure it out. And the one constant is, and Connor Hughes brought this up perfectly to Saleh, and also on the Michael K show, Michael K brought up that the one constant, they've changed play callers, they've changed receivers, they've changed offensive line, they've added running backs, they've done everything. The one constant in this anemic offense is Zach Wilson. And yes, Zach Wilson has that great no-look sidearm throw on that last drive, and wow, that's great. But I don't care about that. I don't care that he can flick the ball 40 yards. And are the Jets concerned? Is the reason the Jets are trying to make this work, are they concerned that Zach's going to go somewhere else and play well? They shouldn't worry about that. The Jets right now need to win football games. And Zach Wilson is not the guy. And the more embarrassing thing is, if Zach Wilson is truly this team's best option, then this team has been failed by the organization. Because last I checked, Aaron Rodgers didn't go down week 7. He didn't go down week 6. He went down in the first quarter of week 1. And this team had opportunity to sign veterans. They had an opportunity to go out and trade for someone. They had opportunities. There were some quarterbacks there. They could have tried to trade for Jacoby Brissett. They could have tried to trade for, Jameis Winston. They could have tried to trade for all these backups. And I knew at the time it would be very difficult to do this. But when I'm seeing Dobbs get shipped off for a 6th-round pick, I'm sorry, but the Jets couldn't throw a 5th-round pick their way. The Jets couldn't give it to Dobbs and just used him as a backup. If you are that concerned about Zach Wilson's confidence by bringing in another quarterback, then guess what? Zach Wilson is not the guy. Zach Wilson is not the guy. And once again, it's the same horror story as last year. It's just earlier. Last year, this team looks great. We keep saying it's going to be Zach that pulls the season down. And what ultimately happened? Zach Wilson pulled this season down. Once again, the Jets this year had a golden opportunity against 3 winnable teams, including 2 at home, where this team, if they go 2-3, they're sitting at 5-4 and looking good down the home stretch. Instead, they only win one of those games. And to be fair, one of those games, they were gifted by the New York Giants. I know Zach has a moment or two. I know Zach has the flash here or there. I know that Zach has that moment that makes your jaw drop. But over and over and over again, he doesn't make the big play. Once again, Tommy DeVito, who is still living at home in New Jersey, has thrown for 3 touchdowns in 2 games. Aiden O'Connell, who got the tar bean out of him by this Jets pass rush, when asked in the key moment of the game, made a play. On a 3rd down play, was asked, put this ball in the end zone. He did it. Now, I know people are going to say, well, that first quarter, Zach with the run, but stepped out of bounds and the whole thing. The Jets still had a 9-3 win lead. The Jets still had opportunities to put that game away. They had opportunities to put that game on ice, and Zach couldn't do it. And even last night, despite how poorly he played all game, the Jets defense with that fumble recovery gave Zach Wilson plenty of time to go down the field and score. And what does he do? Telegraphs a terrible interception where Dan Orlovsky, who's been an adamant defender of Zach, basically said Zach's broken. And you look at that replay, you had the check down running back open, Garrett Wilson open on the other side of the field. But no, Zach Wilson's going to force it into triple coverage to Allen Lazard. Man, it's frustrating. Perfect title. Thank you, Drones. I have to be creative. Yeah, that's what it feels like. Again, like you just feel like this team, like it's like every Jet fan last night, the first thing they did is like, well, time to go to Tankathon, see where we're sitting. It's all over. Rodgers may not want to return. I think Rodgers is going to return. From everything he's saying, I think he's going to come back. I would not return this year if I'm Rodgers. If they're out of it, don't return it. Just get him ready for 2024. so many teams 5 years ago or less that were at the bottom of the barrel are contentious this year, but we're the only team that still can't figure it out. It's because they don't have the quarterback. This league is all about, do you have the quarterback or not? The Jets don't have a quarterback. It's that simple. Do you have a quarterback? Yes or no? Jets don't. And this is the thing that drives me crazy about this, BK, is everyone is like saying, oh, Zach Wilson's a bust. The Jets are concerned he's a bust. Well, guess what? That whole draft class outside Trevor Lawrence is a bust. And even Trevor Lawrence isn't looking too great this year. So Justin Fields is a bust. They're moving off of him. Mac Jones is a bust. They're moving off of him. Trey Lance is a bigger bust than Zach. Can't get on the field, and he's already been traded, yet the Jets are still trying to justify this pick. Even though basically history, remember it, the Jets had their choices of 4 busts. It was just pick your flavor. They picked the Zach Wilson flavor. And it's just incredibly freaking frustrating that this team is good. And again, I've defended Joe Douglas. One of the reasons we talk a lot about this defense and the talent on this team is because Joe Douglas has acquired that talent. But again, it still comes down to this team cannot get out of its own way. Look, it's hard to defend Joe Douglas. I love Joe Douglas a lot. I really respect what he's done and how he's built this roster. But you look at the draft, could have had an offensive weapon. They didn't. You look at this free agency class. Now, do I give it a slight pass like on the Alan Lazards of the world and everything? Because that's who Aaron Rodgers wanted. Look, Aaron Rodgers gave him a shopping list and they got him. Like, that's the thing. And the other thing, too, is the deadline. I agree. Like, I get what they're thinking is. They're thinking is, well, our goal is 2024. Why are we giving up an asset that we could use to get a receiver or get a piece in the offseason? How about you give it to this fan base? Give this team some hope. Like, you want to charge these fans all this money. You want to talk about how great Jet fans are, and you talk about how passionate this fan base is, filling out Las Vegas the other night. It's just incredibly frustrating when you see how passionate this fan base is and how much they freaking care about this team despite how poor they've been. It's just so freaking frustrating. Stephen T, I got to change my PFP on here. Yeah, I think it's about Stephen. I think it's time, in nomine patri filii spiritus sancti. We got to get rid of the Zach Wilson's good. Next year, Jets should really take a QB in the first round. Drones, I don't hate that idea. I've been adamant. The one problem you worry about with the quarterback in the draft, number one, is it going to ruffle feathers with a certain quarterback that they already have on the team? The one thing I will say about next year's draft, though, is it is loaded at the quarterback position. There is a lot of talented quarterbacks. And the question I have, too, though, is the problem is the Jets have a second-round pick. Is could they maybe trade back up in the second round to get someone? I mean, could they get like a Bo Nix in the next round? Could they get like a Ewers in maybe like a later round? But again, it all depends on where they finish. It's tough because there's a lot of great players. Like, I don't think a Marvin Harrison Jr. will be on the board when the time the Jets pick. But when you think about like the offensive linemen, there's a couple really good, like Joe Alt's in there. Louis Fashanu is in there. Brock Bowers, a great tight end. I mean, there's a lot of talented players early in this draft, and especially on the offensive line. But look, it all depends on where the Jets are, because right now, if you look at where they are on Tankathon, basically for the draft, they would be picking 13th today. I mean, there's a lot of teams in front of them, and I love how we're back. Again, it's Groundhog Day for the Jets fans. We're on Tankathon trying to, with strings, figure out where the Jets are going to be picking next year. I would take a quarterback too, but again, it's going to depend on how Rodgers is going to feel. But again, if Rodgers gives the Jets crap, I would say, look, you missed all last season. We need to have a backup plan, and also you're going to be 40. Like, even if you play 2 more years, we're going to need a long-term plan after that. Until he tells us who really makes these asinine decisions. Look, they're never going to tell you. And again, I get the frustration with Saleh, because Michael K asked this question last week. Is someone above you in the organization telling you to play Zach Wilson? And it's kind of like, and I don't even know if it's even that. Maybe it's indirect, because Joe Douglas' organization hasn't added a reliable option. Like, let's put it this way. If Mike White's still on this team and the Jets, once you bring in Aaron Rodgers, I thought Mike White, and look, Mike White got more money with Miami, and I think Mike White made the better decision. Mike White's like, do I stay with the Jets, who again I like, But Aaron Rodgers has played a lot of games, and I might be the backup, but I might not have an opportunity to go to Miami where they have all these toys. And oh, by the way, Tua's one hit from maybe missing the rest of his career, and I could be the starter there. So I don't fault Mike White for leaving. I think it just made too much sense for him. But they didn't add another quarterback. There's no other option. Like, we're talking about Trevor Siemian. Even Trevor Siemian seems like a better option. Trevor Siemian's not a good quarterback. A-Rock and I got upset for getting another quarterback after he blew his foot. Yeah, like, I agree, Drones. If he's really that prickly, like, it is what it is. And look, you need a long-term option. And there's some good options in this draft. I like Bo Nix. I know Penix is going to be the wild card in this draft because there's certain teams that aren't going to draft because he's left-handed. Will the Jets take the opportunity? I don't know. We stand, yeah, and that's the other thing, this lack of discipline. Like, I like Salah as a coach, but this discipline is horrifying. Like, when you look at this team averaging 8 or 9 penalties the last couple of weeks, and not just bad penalties, but crippling penalties where they have killed drives, they've ended opportunities, they've kept the Jets basically, they took points off the board last night. Like, you look at this completely different game. If freaking Uzama doesn't hold there, they get a touchdown with Breece Hall, and this game looks completely different. And look, I think the Jets win because it basically came down to who scored a touchdown last night. The Raiders were that one team that scored a touchdown. Jets weren't. That's who won the game. I think the Jets win that game if they score that touchdown. And this is the other thing. CJ Uzama, like, I'm getting sick and tired of some of these guys, like, playing, like, give Xavier Gibson more touches. Jeremy Rucker needs more touches. And we're getting that point of the season. Let some of these young kids play. Give Izzy some opportunities. Like, I'm looking at some of these young kids, give them an opportunity. Because I'm sick and tired of watching Uzama. Rucker looks better, more athletic, and he's a better long-term player. Get him out on the field. Like, I'm sick and tired of seeing Uzama. I know he's a veteran, but he's just killed this team. Brock Bowers is a good choice, but man, QB is still this team's biggest need. It's all going to come down to two. Like, I don't know if Sanders is going to come out. I think he's hinting that he's going to stay in school, and I think it'd be smart for Sanders to stay in school, continue to make that NIL money, but also because I think he could probably be the number one quarterback next year. But there's other guys. I like Bo Nix a lot out of Oregon. JJ McCarthy looks pretty good in Michigan. I like Nix probably a little bit better than McCarthy. But there's some guys, and maybe they're guys too, where the Jets can get them in around the 10th pick. But the other question then becomes, well, then how else are they fixing this team? Like, how are they approaching free agency? Because the offensive line still is going to need a lot of help. And this is the other thing too that's driving me nuts. Like, I think Max Mitchell played a great game, and Max Mitchell I still think is a developmental piece where we're like, because you look against Crosby, I thought he played very well against Crosby this game. I like Max Mitchell a lot. I think Max Mitchell has a future being a starting 5 offensive lineman for this team. But this team brought in Saffold. Is he ready to play? Again, I think the combo last night was a lot better. Turner just was a turnstile the other day. I give the Jets a lot of credit, but Saffold, is he ready to go? Like, they brought him in. Like, I was hoping it'd be like a 1-week workup, but is he going to play next week? And then Dwayne Brown's come off the IR, but again, is he going to play? And I wouldn't. It's just so freaking frustrating. And Drones, of course, Drake May, Penix, Bo Nix, McCarthy. Any one of those, man, has some to be when the Jets pick. Bo Nix, McCarthy should definitely be there. Penix is the weird one. Penix again because he's left-handed. I mean, I think Drake May is going to go probably number 1. I know Caleb Williams, there's some things about him that I'm curious if are going to impact his draft stat. But look, I don't think the Jets are going to get in the top 5 to get either of those two guys. I think those guys are basically going to go 1, 2, or depending on the draft order. If somehow, because of the weird thing with the Panthers and the Bears, like depending on what those two picks are, I think the Bears are probably going to take Marvin Harrison Jr. with one of their top 5 picks at this point. But I'm just looking at it right now. Like, if I'm the Jets too, like, do they add a playmaker? I mean, there's some good playmakers there too. But the problem is you also have to wonder what teams are going to be taking a quarterback ahead of them. I mean, I feel like the Patriots are going to take a quarterback. I think the Bears are going to take a quarterback. The Giants are going to take a quarterback. That's 3 quarterbacks right there. And that's even before I mentioned the Cardinals. So the Cardinals, they might. Green Bay, they might. The Rams, they might. I mean, the Broncos, they might. Falcons, they might. Buccaneers, despite Baker Mayfield playing well, they might. I mean, you're looking for the Jets right now. There's a couple teams that still could want a quarterback. So, uh, let's see. New York Jets, Florida. How's it going, Florida? Bench 10, 32, and 87. Uzama agreed. Carter, give him less touches, 10. 10's out on Lazard. They're not going to bench Lazard, but again, can we call up Corey Davis? Does he want to come out of retirement? I'm serious. Like, can we see if Corey Davis has made a decision to come back? And look, I never thought I'd say this, but I miss Corey Davis. Like, that to me has been the biggest loss for the Jets. It isn't been Cole Hardman. It's been Corey freaking Davis because he's a great blocker. And say what you want, but he was a very good receiver. Let's see. Dude from Oklahoma too. Like, the problem with the Jets is going to be if they really want a quarterback. The weird thing for the Jets might be to, in a weird way, I mean, Jaden Daniels is another from LSU, Quinn Ewers from Texas. In some ways, the Jets' best way to get a quarterback would maybe be trading back out of 10. Do they trade back, try to get a later first and an early second somehow? That probably is their best way to get a quarterback. So it'll be interesting. I think the top will be up there as well. If they don't change the QB, Jets will draft top 8. Man, God, it's Groundhog Day. Again, you know me. I love the draft, and I will be pounding that this offseason. But, I mean, I'm just looking at the teams in front of them. I think the Falcons and the Commanders, they're in the NFC, so you can talk about them playing better. I think the Jets are, potentially better than the Buccaneers. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. The hardest part is the bottom 6 teams is Green Bay, Panthers, Chicago, Cardinals, Patriots, Giants. So who knows? Like, I mean, I'm just imagining this scenario. Like, I know I'm really looking forward into the future, but yeah, I 12 years of Rodgers playing draft the QB is not the right move. That's the hard part. Like, it's like, do you get someone to help Aaron Rodgers next year, a long-term pick? I can see both arguments. Personally, I'd rather have the quarterback to sit behind Aaron Rodgers for year 2. Again, it's a quarterback league. You can potentially find tackles in later rounds. You can potentially find a lot of pieces in later rounds. It's hard to find the freaking franchise quarterback. Just think about the Jets. How long have we been freaking looking? So that's the thing, though. It's just, I would just try to do the best. Again, it depends. If the best tackle's on the board and the Jets like a quarterback that they feel they can trade back up for in round 2 and get later in the draft and more of a developmental player, then sure. But I think everything has to be on the table. Again, if Aaron Rodgers gives you crap, it's just like, well, you missed the whole season last year. We can't rely on you. And, we need to have you basically your successor. It's not going to be Zach. So I know this team is set up to win now. I'm talking about, again, if depending on where they sit in the draft, if they're sitting in the draft and a great opportunity to draft a great young quarterback, you do it. You don't pass up on a good quarterback because you can still have pieces. You can still have free agency. Like, here's a thought. Devontae Adams this offseason. Could the Jets bring him in? I mean, we saw the Instagram post how much Aaron Rodgers is buddy-buddy. Now, maybe Devontae doesn't want to leave because of the Raiders' newfound success, but I think that he'd be open to it. Again, it depends on what you use for your pieces and how you add pieces this offseason. But it's just funny. I love how we're already talking about the draft. We're not even at freaking Thanksgiving. Like, this is a year we were supposed to be talking about this team being in a great situation, this team being in an opportunity to compete for the AFC East. And instead, it's the week before Thanksgiving, and we are already freaking talking about the draft. We are already freaking talking about, like, this whole thing. It's just crazy. It's like, it's frustrating. Again, I'm struggling to speak just because my mind's freaking mush. Because again, we're living through the same nightmare over and over and over again. The rookie would be the backup, and A-Rod would start. Probably 80 QBs in college are an upgrade over. Yeah, it's frustrating. But look, this Jet team went all in on Rodgers, and look, it's backfired. But they need to also have a long-term plan because they need to figure out what they're going to do at the quarterback position. But the other thing too is there's a lot of things this Jets team has to do to get better, and it's frustrating. But look, my biggest takeaway is, does this Jet team want to win? Because I'm not convinced now by this front office, because they've had opportunities to add to this team. They have opportunities to go for it this year. And I'm not even saying go for it to win a Super Bowl, but at least give this team a shot to make the playoffs. I mean, I'm looking now, Buffalo and Miami, and with this defense, you think you can compete, but can they freaking score? I mean, they've gone 36 possessions without a touchdown. That's against bad defenses. The Chargers defense is bad. The Raiders defense is bad, and they still can't freaking score. But I just wanted to air that out tonight. It was frustrating. There's a lot of season left. Believe it or not, there's still 8 games left of this. I mean, Jets have scored 8 touchdowns in 9 games. Are they going to score 8 over the last 8? We'll have to see, but it's frustrating. The season feels like it's going off the rails. I know Robert saw a quote at the beginning of the season that this wasn't going to snowball. Well, it looks like it's about to snowball. And the Jets, until they prove us otherwise, I think a lot of Jet fans are out on the season, because we've invested our time, we've invested our Sundays and our Mondays, and to sit there and watch an offense that, again, scored 2 touchdowns in 55 possessions, hasn't scored a touchdown in 36 possessions, and submitting ourselves to watching this. Like, this is infuriating. Like, this is torture watching this offense. And the problem is, it doesn't feel like there's any hope of it getting better. Thanks so much for joining us here on Rich Sports Talk. If you join us afterward, you can always comment. I'll get to your questions in the next video. Always appreciate it. If you're a Jet fan, new to the channel, give us a like, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of our latest content. We'll be here talking about the New York Jets and now likely talking about the NFL draft going forward. But make sure you follow us so you don't miss anything. I'm your host, Nolan Rich. Thanks so much for joining us here on Rich Sports Talk.